Hey everybody, Oliver Graves, and I want to talk to you today about a comedian. So this is going to be a little story about a comedian I met when I was doing America's Got Talent, known as Alex Hooper. So that's Alex Hooper, not Alice Cooper. Sometimes I talk about him in live streams, etc. And people are a little confused when I'm talking about. Alice Cooper is a musician. Feeding My Frankenstein wears like makeup and stuff. That's a person. That's someone else that I talk about sometimes too. Alex Hooper was on America's Got Talent, and he was on season 13, just like me. We met at America's Got Talent when we were both there filming, and I kind of wanted to share my perspective and a little information on that because I know a lot of people have seen what I did on America's Got Talent, and I think they need to know more about that story because Alex Hooper and his performance is a big part of my story. So I guess we should start at kind of the beginning of what it's kind of like to film for America's Got Talent. You know, it starts very early in the morning, and they like to film little segments. They like to get you like, hey, and sit next to another act and kind of talk and just like, why are you here? What do you do? That kind of thing. And that's kind of how it was. There's a lot of people there, and they'll pull people aside and they'll film a little bit of a piece here and there. And I watched them do that with Alex. They did it with me, and they're rotating through other people. You know, I'm there with a lot of people, a lot of notable people too. Eventually, I started kind of, getting to know all those people. It wasn't just Alex I was talking to, but just all of us kind of started getting into things a little bit more as the night went on, as it kind of went from day to noon to afternoon to night. I talked about my style a little bit. I'm like, well, I'm pretty dry. I do like one-liners. And he's like, okay. And he kind of talked about his a little bit, but he's like, well, that's not really what I'm doing tonight. I'm like, oh, okay. And he was dressed, in the red and blue and fluffy. And he's like, I don't normally dress like this. I'm like, okay, I normally dress like this. He didn't really necessarily want to tell me what he was going to do. It was supposed to be like a secret and stuff. But he eventually, tells me like, well, I'm here. I'm going to roast them. I'm going to roast the judges. Like, they're not going to see it coming. They don't know. I'm like, oh, right. That's of course not. So it gets a lot closer to actual showtime. So you film all this stuff. Then they film the actual live show. They get the audience to come in, like, I don't know, 6 o'clock, something like that. Get in the seats and stuff. And that's when they brought like all the kid acts, any act that had a child in it under the age of 18, boom, they had to like be ready to go and everything. Whereas anyone, like all of us, kind of like solo performers over 18, no equipment, comedians, we kind of waited even longer, and we kind of just hung out and all that stuff. And that's probably when we talked even more. Probably talked about the things I just talked about. So eventually it gets, later on in the show, and it's like, it seems like they want to have more people backstage, and then people are kind of coming and going, and then like Alex gets pulled backstage. Like, oh, okay, well, they're taking a comedian now. And then I got pulled backstage. So we were both backstage at one point at the same time, waiting around, and you can actually see, because when you're backstage, you can see kind of, there's some monitors, you really can't see the stage, kind of blocked, like your vision, but you can see monitors. I'm tall, so I could. And you could see Tyra Banks, who was over there. So at one point, I do my interview with Tyra, and you can actually see pictures in that Alex Hooper is sitting in the background during that interview because he was back there waiting, not sure when he was going to go up. That's kind of what they do to us. Both of us were like that. We're like, you could be going up anytime now. Like, at one point they told me, like, you got to get ready for your interview with Tyra. And then someone's like, no, you're not going to do that right now. And then they're like, no, you're ready for your interview with Tyra. Go talk to Tyra Banks. I'm like, oh my God. So you had to be like ready for anything, anytime. And I'm sure that's exactly the same thing Alex is going through. He's sitting, being told, you could be up next, which is not necessarily normal for comedians. Usually comedians know. That's a very abnormal environment for how we get to perform. It's you go to a show knowing you're booked, knowing when you're going up, knowing how long you're doing, etc. So the whole thing for both of us is not what we're used to. It's not be ready anytime. You might have to follow this act, you might follow that act. Who knows? But we did have, our pieces and everything ready. Then at some point, they stop everything because that portion of the show is done. That audience needs to leave, and they're going to take a break. But then they're like, okay, we're bringing in the new audience, and we're filming once again. And yet again, they do the thing where they're kind of getting these bigger acts, the more elaborate acts, people that have stunts, people that do tumbling and need rig work and stuff, get them backstage. And then slowly they started pulling comedians and like the solo acts back there. So I got to hear a lot of the show, and out of nowhere I just remember being back there and Alex is gone. And I'm like, oh. And then boom, he was on stage. And it was just about indescribable. I mean, you can watch the clip. You can see how Alex handles that. But I was backstage for it. So I wasn't in the audience, and I'm telling you, it was the most energetic audience I've ever heard. I even remember someone backstage, one of the crew was like, I've never seen the audience like this. So Alex does his intro. He talks about bringing joy and everything, and I know this is a bait and switch. I'm already like in on the joke, and I think I think alone, it's a great joke. His intro is a joke, so he's able that I think already. It's brilliant, and then he gets to his piece and. It was just utter, just like chaotic energy. There was definitely kind of a split room. You could hear people like laughing, but also booing. And I'm telling you, his 2-minute piece on stage, that's about how long you get. It took so long to go over. And he handled it so well. Because I'm just, every step, I'm trying to look up at a monitor and I'm listening. And you hear those buzzers. You that first one, I was like, oh no. And I thought he was being so funny. Like, legitimately, I thought he's handling it super well. Because if you've never had 3,000 people just like a wave, like a sea, like just this rush of everything. There was laughter, but there was just so much like people wanting the X, people booing, just shocked, and they're overpowering him with noise and energy, and he's trying so hard to get to the next joke, to get to the next judge and everything, to go from one to the other to the next, but it was extreme talent on his part. I'm not kidding at all, because he had to be, he didn't at ever one point kind of flop and let go and like wait it out. He didn't like die up there, he said things, like, calm down peasants, like he handled it like a comic, like a really good comic, and he stuck through his piece, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to stop when you get 4 buzzes. And he got the 1, and he got the 2, and he was determined, and everything, he did not back down with all of those people. I thought he was telling funny jokes too. On top of all of this, I'm backstage, and I'm thinking, this is how loud the buzzer is. This is how loud it's going to be when you get out there. And I knew what was happening is he's going down the line of one the next, because you got to see the clip, or you could watch the clip right now. Pause, spoilers. The judges had no idea. Like, they didn't know what was coming, but Mel B did not want to be roasted, Heidi. And they're trying to make him stop. Like, they couldn't take it. They couldn't take being made fun of. But Alex took the buzzers. He could take it. He took all of the negative energy, and he did what the judges couldn't do. But I felt for him, and I was back there like, obviously, yeah, I'm selfishly thinking, what am I gonna do? But I hadn't performed yet. As a comic, this is something you do, is you gauge an audience based on how another comic performs. So everything in my head is telling me I'm telling a few kind of mean jokes. Like I have some jabs in my jokes. Like they're not gonna like my jokes. If they're not like what Alex is doing, I don't think they're gonna get me at all. And I was hoping so much that something would come about with Alex's set. Like and again, it's 7 minutes. He powered through it so well because he wasn't supposed to be up there that long. And he's getting down to Simon, and Simon is a good sport because Simon didn't buzz him. Simon knew what was happening, and they were saving him for last. That Alex is going to get to him. And there's jokes that didn't make it to air. There's a few, I don't really remember all of them. I know there's one, and you need to ask Alex about it. I hope he remembers it, because I don't, on Simon, about Clay Aiken. Because people backstage, the crew, loved that joke. There was like 3 or 4 people that were like, oh my god. I don't remember what that joke was. I don't know if I ruined the punchline already by saying Clay Aiken and mentioning Simon Cowell. But hopefully you do. Use that joke again. Tell people, if you're going to tell people this story, tell that joke and tell them that people backstage were laughing, because they were. Because it was funny, because you're funny, Alex. But that's the thing, is I knew he's funny, and I knew he's getting laughs. And I felt that he was so cheated, he was so robbed, because I think at some point then Mel went over and buzzed from Simon's buzzer, like, get him off, or whatever, something like that. They were the four buzzers, which are earth-shatteringly loud. I wasn't on the stage, but it's all you hear. But it had to be to quiet that audience down, which he commanded and did so well, which I dare you to find someone else who could do it as well as he did. I don't think you could. I don't think I could. And that's what I was thinking when I'm like, oh my god, I have to go out there soon. I don't know if I'm next. They could have put me next. They didn't. But that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh man. Because I didn't think I thought I was going to have probably about as bad as a time as him. And he comes off stage, and I think he filmed a quick thing with Tyra, and Tyra acted all mad, like whatever Tyra Banks does. That's my Tyra Banks impression, I guess. And at one point they had a security guy go, hey, you gotta get out of here. And Alex, oh, okay. And it was being filmed, like they were playing a prank on him. They were just giving him a hard time. And then there's a producer it's someone you work with, because they want to know what you're doing before you be filmed. So you email like back and forth about what you're going to do. So they knew what I was going to be doing, and Alex was going to be doing. We actually worked with the same producer, and she comes over, and I'm standing here, and they're talking to each other. And I didn't want to interrupt, but I really wanted to make a point to say something, because the producer, Meg, is saying what a good job Alex did. It's like, no, it was really, really good. You really, you delivered on exactly what, like you said you could roast them, and you were here to roast them, and you did it. And just like trying to, emphasize that, hey, this was crazy, and you did a good job. And I know at some point I felt the need to chime. I'm like, no, seriously, you did a really good. Like I said something to that effect, like butting into the conversation. But I was standing right there, and I had no idea if I was ever going to see Alex again. So I made a point to say that, and I still mean it to this day. I think Alex might be the most talented person they've ever had on America's Got Talent. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't looked at all 6,000 people, but I just know what I saw that night, and the resolve to continue on in the way that Alex did, and how to, like, do you deal with the crowd? Like, you're being filmed for TV. How do you deal with this? It's like, well, you as a comic, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore the stampede of elephants in the room. And he acknowledged it, but was a calm down peasants, that I think it's appropriate. He was being flamboyant, being over the top, and he carried it and held it the whole way through. And then I thought I was going to have a very similar experience. So when you see me saying stuff like, I thought I was going to get buzzers, it's because of Alex Hooper's set. When I say things like, I didn't think it was going to go well, when I say things like, I have like maybe 2 of the judges would like it. It put me down pretty far. Because I don't know if I'm, able to compare myself. I really do think Alex is very talented, but it's so, like, well, I'm a really good comedian, so if a really good comedian doesn't do it, I don't know if it's brazen or full of myself to be like, I am as good as Alex Hooper. I don't know that I actually am, but at the time I'm thinking, I'm funny, Alex is funny, and funny isn't working. So I'm not trying to compare myself or say, like, anything other than that. Like, I felt we were, on the same level, which I don't know if that's fair to say. And then if someone at like this level of funny isn't getting haws in response, then me at this level of funny is not going to get haws in response. And I don't know how I feel about the whole the boy who cried. Like, I was on AGT and I cried and the video went viral because I cried. I'm not very comfortable with that. But I was ready to walk out there and face that same audience and face the same defeat that I saw happen to a fellow comic. And I didn't receive that, so yeah, I started crying. But I don't know that would have happened if not for watching the set that I watched. I don't know that I would be talking to as many people as I'm talking to right now if not for Alex Hooper. I mean that sincerely. That if I was more blank, if I had no idea what kind of audience it was, no idea how they respond to comedy, if I had no clue, I don't think I would have been so shocked by the response that I got. And I am so glad that Alex is getting a second chance. I'm so glad they brought him back. I'm glad that Howie admitted that he was swayed by the audience, like the energy of that night, and he said yes, and Simon said, and they said yes, and they gave Alex a second chance because he deserved it. He totally deserved it. He's clearly talented, clearly really good at what he does, and you put a challenge in front of him, like roasting the judges, he rises to that challenge, and he's doing it. And I hope he does really well. I see he's on the current season of America's Got Talent, and I would implore people to not only look up his clip for America's Got Talent, but look up his other stand-up and support him and everything on his journey, and just keep his journey going, because he's also very genuinely a kind person. He never spoke down to me. He never kind of rolled his eyes or like, you're a comedian. He never pulled any of that to me. I told him I'm a comedian, and he talked to me, and I told him about my experience level and everything, and he talked to me candidly. I don't know what else to say other than all those compliments, and I don't know if he remembers any of these things. I tend to have a pretty good memory, but I really wish him well, and I'm hope he can keep going far. And Alex, if you ever need like an opener, if you need anybody like to open for you, like if you're in like the Bay Area, I'm sure you actually know plenty of people. But if you ever need like an opener that was on America's Got Talent, actually you probably still know plenty of people. But if you ever need an opener that wears a lot of makeup, oh right, you live in LA and stuff. Okay, well if you ever want me to open for you, I would probably, let's, anyway. But also vote for Alex Hooper on America's Got Talent.